Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football Dill. Saturday afternoon, the Oklahoma commitment sweatshirt comes back on for what I believe is one of the more fascinating prospects that you see in the 2026 cycle. Three-star defensive lineman James Carrington committing to Oklahoma. Now, look, go ask the Florida State fans. This kid committed to Florida State a couple months ago, and I got up there and I very, very high on what James Carrington can be as a football player over the next couple of years. The reason I use the term most fascinating is, Dill, 2 years ago, this kid was a bona fide blue chip prospect. There are programs across the country were recruiting this kid really damn hard. The problem is over the last 24 months, he hasn't really grown at all. So you look at James Carrington going into his senior year, 6'2", 260 pounds. He's absolutely put together, but he's a little bit of a tweener. Kind of lacks some measurables that a lot of teams desire in their defensive linemen. But Dill, although he lacks measurables, this kid's a really good football player. Like, go turn on the film. Playing at Bishop year was extremely impressive. Playing some of the better high school football players from across the country. This is how Jim Nagy wants to operate. He wants to find value. Give me the guys that are flying under the radar, that are being undervalued at the high school ranks. I look at James Carrington and say, that's kind of the sense that I get. Like, there are teams that will pass on him because he's a little bit of a tweener. You're not really sure what position he's going to play. But if you just go scout the football player, like, I think he's a really, really solid defensive lineman. And Dill, I'm just to say this right off the bat, kind of reminds me a little bit of Grayson Halton. Like, all the conversations that we're about to have with James Carrington kind of reminds you how we talked about Grayson Halton a couple of years ago. And we all know what Grayson Halton has blossomed into for Oklahoma. In my opinion, one of the better interior defensive line pass rushers that you see in the country going into 2025. Can you get that kind of development from James Carrington? Really excited to get into this football player. Really excited to talk about how Jim Nagy's going about his business on the trail. Before we get into it, as always, to the Oklahoma fans, appreciate you guys. Look, if you're taking time out of your Saturday afternoon / Saturday night to listen to the boys, appreciate you guys. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Dill, James Carrington coming to Oklahoma just seems like a Jim Nagy kind of football player. How are we feeling about it?
And I think one big thing when you're scouting these guys who are not athletically exactly maybe what you're looking for
Sure.
from a size standpoint or from an athletic standpoint.
Sure.
I think playing at a school like Bishop Gorman and and when you get your shot to play a matter day out of California and playing really well and looking like, when a double team comes on you playing a 3-tech, you can physically hold up even though you are, quote, smaller defensive lineman. I think that's a really important piece of the puzzle because, again, you said it, like the measurables aren't there. And I know he's got the long arms, so that's
Can we talk about that real quick? I don't mean to interrupt you, but that I do think is a very important conversation. Like, he's 6'2", he's short, right? He's got an 80-inch wingspan, man. So he's got some long arms. Partially the big deal about having, shorter defensive linemen is normally they lack length. Although James Carrington's a little bit shorter. Like, the dude has long arms, and you see that play out when he's on the football field. Doesn't really let guys get in on his chest plate. I do think that's worth noting, but I also do agree with you that there are certain things. I think just the ability to put on mass is probably a question mark with James Carrington.
That's what I was almost gonna go to, because do you think he's got the horsepower to play on the edge and be a really high level player, a consistent edge player? That'd probably be what I'd put to like Jim Nagy, and he's probably seeing something because I don't really see him getting up to 285 pounds. Do you?
Really? I think there's a chance that he can, and we'll see because he's already pretty filled out. I think we had the same conversation with Grayson Halton. Look, although Grayson Halton is a little bit undersized because of the quicks that he has, I think he's going to be okay. And with James Carrington, look, he's a little bit shorter, can play with good leverage. I think he has the ability to hold up. And here's the other thing that I'll add in that conversation. Like, even if he's not a multi-purpose all-down defensive lineman, there is value that he can provide to you. Like, similar to Grayson Halton. Look, Grayson Halton ain't going to start for Oklahoma. It's going to be Dominic Williams and it's going to be Jaden Jackson. But to have a guy like Grayson Halton trotted out on the football field, those 3rd and long situations saying, hey, we don't need you to stop the run. Just pin your ears back and go get after the quarterback. Grayson Halton, although not a multi-purpose defensive lineman, adds tremendous value to this Oklahoma defense. I think you can say the same exact thing for a kid like James Carrington as well.
And that's probably a good point because, like, there are those things like that explosiveness off the ball and the ability to get into guys quickly and run them through the quarter or run them right into the quarterback's lap is like a really kind of unique trait he has. So I'm kind of with you. Like, it's kind of a risk, I'd say, because again, like I've heard like draft scouts or draft experts especially kind of talk about that idea. And I know people will kind of point to like, oh, look at James Harrison. He made it work as a shorter guy. And then it's like, well, the counterpoint to that is most guys don't. Most guys like J.J. Watt, or they look like Von Miller. They kind of have the ideal frame. Again, it's a risk, and I'm sure Jim Nagy's aware. But look, he's not going to pay for James Carrington what you're paying for your 5-star defensive lineman. And if he gets it right, you have a really good piece to build into your system and also have kind of the firepower to get some other guys.
That's a nice segue into how Jim Nagy goes about his business. Is like, I don't know how big of a risk he is because it's not like Jim Nagy is going out and paying him 7 figures to come to Oklahoma.
He's not what Jake Cruel commanded. And Jake Cruel, again, Jim Nagy gets that like, oh, are you going to ever go out and get anybody? Yeah, he'll go out and get guys he loves. And Jake Cruel might very well be worth it because you talked about a guy who is kind of an all-weather play every snap of the game.
Dill, you talk about not a risky prospect. Jay Cruel's the definition of that. Like, there are not many more polished football players in the country than Jay Cruel. And so it's like, hey, when we're going to spend our money, we're going to do it with conviction. It's not going to be a guy like Felix Ojo who has an enormously high ceiling but has a lot of variability in terms of what we're getting. We're going to go get Jay Cruel, and we know we're going to get the bang for our buck with this kid. Look, you're right. James Carrington, a little bit more of a not sure what it's going to look like. At the end of the day, I think this kid's going to provide value. I like this one.
No, I will say this type of move is probably going to be how we'll judge Jim Nagy and his success at Oklahoma because this system he's kind of operating in is a little bit different. Like Oklahoma isn't going to quite have the athletic bodies that a lot of these other big schools that Oklahoma's kind of in the same realm with are going to have, and you just can kind of.
I don't know if I don't. So let me fight you on that because they're grabbing some of those kind of bodies. They just might not be great football players right now. You know what I mean? So you look at some of the 3-star prospects they have coming in. It's not like they're athletically not good. They're just really raw football players. You know, the guys who are the blue chip guys are athletically really gifted and really good football players at this stage. The guys that Oklahoma's going out and getting, you know, for cheap in Jim Nagy's mind, are the guys that we think are just as good of athletes, just need a little bit more development as football players. The question here, Dill, is we know Oklahoma is not out of money. Like, we know Oklahoma didn't suddenly just lose all their money, right? Where are they going to go spend their money? You know, they went out and got Bo Bentley, and they went out and got a guy like Jake Cruel. Do you see Oklahoma being one of the most aggressive teams in the country in the transfer portal in the winter? Because you kind of know they have some ammo in the clip, and they certainly ain't using it on the high school recruiting trail. How aggressive do you think this football team gets in the portal over the next?
I am really interested, and I'm also really interested to see if like they're waiting for senior evaluations and then they'll start ramping it back up because it's again, he's kind of coming in as a very unique, and he's doing it his way. He doesn't really seem to care what the optics are as much as like some Oklahoma fans might be frustrated with the trail and what's going on. It's not seemed to bother him one bit. So I am kind of curious. Like, he looks at like, oh, this kid now is playing at the level I wanted to see him play at. Will they be a really aggressive team come December? And in terms of like, okay, well, now we're going to start putting our final offers on the table. Because I do think that I'd be surprised if they stay in that 20 to 25 range in the recruiting rankings. I don't think they're going to get themselves in the top 5 like they were with BV running the show. But I do think they're going to get themselves up a little higher than what they are.
And if they don't, sorry to cut you, but if they don't, they're probably going to be spending
in the portal. That's
yeah, and that's kind of what I think Jim Nagy's trying to do is like, hey, if we're going to go out and spend a lot of money, we kind of want to know we're going to get a return on our investment, and we want to get a return on our investment relatively quickly. Like, when you go to the portal, it's not really murky. You're not betting on a 17-year-old kid that hasn't played his senior year of football yet. You're betting on a guy that has 2 or 3 years of college football production. You know what you're going to get it, and you know you're going to get it immediate. We'll see, dude. It's the most fascinating program in the country when it comes to talent acquisition. We'll see how it plays out. That's all you can really say. Like, I can get up here and agree with it. I can get up here and disagree with it. There are pros and cons. You can't really have a take until you see this thing play
But at
out.
least he's doing it his way. Like,
I
it's not
agree,
like
man.
this murky hybrid of like, because
Yeah.
you see coaches who like I don't think have the conviction to do it their way, and that's where I think you get into trouble. Again, at least he's going to go down on his sword because he has not budged an inch in terms of what he's doing on the trail.
There is a very, very clear plan. And that's a lot more than you can say with a lot of other programs across the country that seem just be like throwing money around and throwing talent on the roster and hoping it sticks. There's a clear plan. Now, is the plan going to work? We're going to find out. All right, we'll cut it there. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. We'll talk to y'all later. Peace.